So within the past few weeks, Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana have been getting their new party off the ground. Currently, it has the placeholder name of they're calling it Your Party, but I believe there's still a name in the works which will be developed at the upcoming conference. I think it's in September, where all the people who are registering are going to be able to have a say on the party platform and I guess also the name. But it's been a very interesting dialogue within UK politics over the past couple of weeks of what the role of this new party will be, how much success they'll be able to have in the upcoming election, which I believe is next year, if they're going to be able to adequately fight back against the Reform Party, who is currently leading in the polls on an electoral level, or if they're just going to split the vote with Labour and kind of lead to the far right and the Reform Party having an even easier victory. And this poll here makes the conversation even more interesting, in my opinion. And this article is talking about a poll which shows that Reform voters, so people who currently plan on voting for Reform, prefer Jeremy Corbyn to Keir Starmer on almost every metric. And let's actually go through what those metrics are here. So who they think is more authentic. By far, they think Jeremy Corbyn is more authentic. Who they think is for working people. By far, Jeremy Corbyn. They think he's more hardworking, honest, intelligent, that he makes radical decisions, more principled, represents change, strong, trustworthy, and understands people like me. So this is pretty clear-cut evidence that while I'm sure Reform voters who are very anti-immigrant, probably very anti-LGBTQ, probably more conspiratorial minded, and they're thinking, probably have some World Economic Forum type conspiracies. And to be fair to those people, there is a conspiracy with the World Economic Forum, but it's out in the open. It's not how they paint it of, oh, these people are secretly, implementing puppet governments to do their bidding. The conspiracy is out in the open. The conspiracy is global capitalism. The fact that these global elites are openly saying what they want to do to the world in front of all of us. Like, there's no backroom stuff going on. Like, they tell it in the open. These tech leaders talking about how they want AI to take over human jobs. Like, this type of stuff is in the open. So to be fair to the people who are in that conspiracy world, there is a conspiracy there. They just go too far with it. Like, they miss the forest for the trees. Like, what the actual conspiracy is out in the open. It's not that Klaus Schwab is like installing, prime ministers and presidents across the world. The real conspiracy is that the business and corporate elite have much more power than many nation states at this point, and their decision making is harming the future of humankind. But anyways, what I'm saying is that the Reform voters ideologically probably don't agree with Jeremy Corbyn on much, who is much more pro-immigrant, pro-LGBTQ, all of that stuff. But where they do see authenticity in him and probably agree with him is his ire for the corporate class, for the elite, the fact that he is willing to stand on business when it comes to issues like Israel-Palestine, when it comes to kind of pointing out the villains in society for being the billionaires, saying that they're the cause of people's problems. Whereas Keir Starmer is just a neoliberal elite himself and is not going to have that type of language, and he's not going to relate to working people the same way that Jeremy Corbyn will. Even if those working people disagree with Jeremy Corbyn on their social policy, on their personal ideology, they can at least see that Jeremy Corbyn is someone who cares about working people, cares about the poor and middle classes, and wants to change society to help them for the better. Whereas Keir Starmer, they just see as another one of the elites who is a cause of their problem. And now one question that you can ask yourself from this poll is, does this just mean that Corbyn's new party will split the vote more with Labour and lead to Reform having an easier victory? Or does it mean that he might actually be able to peel off a small percentage of Reform voters? And I think that's a valid conversation to have, because you might say that, just because they say they prefer Corbyn over Starmer doesn't mean they actually want to vote for either of them. They might think both these guys are not in line with their own values and ideology. Immigration alone is going to be a huge factor in the upcoming election, and Reform is the party who's clearly going to get all the anti-immigrant votes. And I think if Jeremy Corbyn's party was going to find electoral success, it would be more so by taking votes away from Labour, Lib Dems, Greens, and then also just activating people who don't usually vote. That would more so be the recipe for success. I feel like if he's trying to get Reform voters, that's kind of a failed strategy. It's kind of like what we saw in the last US election when Kamala Harris and her campaign, especially in the last few months of the election, went all in on trying to get Republican voters, campaigning with Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney, all these Republicans or Republican adjacent people, trying to peel off Republican votes. And then she ended up getting a lower percentage of Republican voters or Republican leaning independents than even Joe Biden did. So it was a very failed strategy, and it's something that more liberal or left-wing political movements need to realize, that your winning strategy is not by peeling off right-wing voters, okay? Right-wing voters don't like left-wing ideology. That's just how it is. Left-wing or liberal movements need to understand that they win by having a coalition of center to center-left to liberal to progressive to left-wing voters. You need to get all those people and activate the vote. That was why Kamala lost, is because a lot of people stayed home. Kamala could have won without going for any Republican votes, but getting left-wing or progressive people who stayed home to come out for her. And the Corbyn party needs to have that same mentality, okay? They shouldn't actually be going for reform voters. But what this poll tells me is that if either one of these people, Starmer or Corbyn, were to have the ability to peel away even like 1%, 2%, 3% of reform voters, clearly Jeremy Corbyn would be the one to do it. And I think what this poll says in general is that Jeremy Corbyn is going to relate way more to working people than Keir Starmer ever could.